The next part of our exercise is about methods. There are several types of methods. First, we will talk about instance and class methods, and at the end we will talk about constructors. So let's create a new class with the name dogs. We have already here a main method generated for us, but first we will put here some data, some attributes in methods or behavior for our class dogs. We will have one variable of Boolean type, and this variable will be class variable. That's why we will put static keyword at the beginning, then our data type Boolean, and the name of variable is sitting. And now we will have several methods. So the methods, they are generally of two types: the methods that return some value and the methods that do not return any value. So the first type of methods are the methods returning a type, returning some data type. And you are defining this data type at the beginning. So, for example, we want our dogs to bark, and that's why we're creating method of data type string, and the name of method is get bark sound. We are putting parentheses at the end, we are opening curly braces, and we are putting the statements for this method inside. Since this method is of return type, there must be a keyword return, and after the keyword we can put what exactly the method should return. This will be the word woof. So methods returning a data type. First is the data type that will be returned of this return word woof. Next we have the name of our method, and we have parentheses. The second type of our methods are the methods that are returning nothing. That is said that they are of void type. And our method is void sit is sitting equals to true. So in this case we had one method that was returning us after the execution of this method the word something, some value after the return keyword, and this method will return us nothing. However, the value of this variable is sitting will be assigned the value true. We can say that this method is now instance method. That is, this method can be accessed through the object. And let us say that we want the void method to be class method. In this case, in the same way as we do this with our class variables, we are putting the keyword static at the beginning. So now this method is class method. That is that this method can be accessed with in a static way with class name. So we will put here also some other methods. So another static method, void stand, is the variable is sitting will be assigned value false, and we'll put here one method of Boolean type is sitting, and this method returns the value of the variable is sitting. So when we will execute this method, then we will receive true or false, depending on which value this variable currently has. And now we will define our main method, but maybe before we come to this, let's just go briefly through instance and class methods. So once more, the instant methods, for example, this string get barked sound or Boolean is sitting, thus is sitting method, they can be accessed through the object, and this we will see now in our main method. And you don't see any class keyword static before. And our two methods sit and stand, they do have static keyword, and these methods, they can be accessed with the class name, and they these methods, they are shared between all objects. So now let us access some of these methods in our main statement. Maybe we will make it in a proper way better. We will save this class and we will create program. Docs program. So first what we want to do, we want to create an object of this class, using this class as a template. And for this purpose, we are writing docs, the name of the class, then the name of the object, this will be my doc, equals new docs, and putting parentheses. So now we have instantiated a new object, and we now want to access the methods. And now we will see the difference between accessing instance methods and class methods. So we will use our print line statements. So first we would like to access the method getBarkSound. This method is instance method. It means that this method should be accessed with through the object. So we put first the name of our object, my dog, dot, and now we are putting the method name getBarkSound. Okay, I wanted to make it shorter, but now it's a bit longer. So get my dog dot get barked sound, and parentheses here. When we are running, we receive the return statement here. Woof. The next method that we want to access is sitting method. So we want to know if our dog is sitting. Is my dog sitting? Plus, and now we are writing the method name here, and we are accessing this method name with our object name. So this is my dog dot is sitting, and brace and parenthesis. Let us print it. Is my dog sitting? False. So now the current value, this is the default value, is false. The next what we want to do, we want to access our class methods. And as you remember from class variables, the class variables and class methods or static methods, they should be accessed in a static way. That means that we should use the name of the class to access these variables. And this is what we do. So next, well, we don't want to print anything first. We want to access this method, and we want to tell our dog to sit down. So then we write the name of the class dogs, and then we write the name of the method sit. And now we want to check what is the current value of the variable is sitting. So theoretically, when we call this method, the value of this variable should turn to true. So when we run this code, indeed we see that now the value of the variable is true. Let us call the method stand, and we are also accessing this method in a static way. Here we are using the class name that corresponds to this name, and we see that now the value of this variable is false, because it was the result of calling this method with this statement. We have changed the value of this variable to false. So this was our method. These were our method statements. The next part of our exercise is about constructors. So for constructors, let us create a new class with the name book2. Actually, I have so many books. Maybe I will just put here books in order not to have too many numbers here. Okay. So what is constructor? Constructor is a special method that is used to initialize objects of a class. So before, till now, we were using, I will open this one, for example, we were using for example, this statement here to declare and initialize an object. This is constructor. So this is called, this part here is constructor. We were using till now the default constructor. This our parentheses did not have anything inside here. In order to use the rich language of Java, the full depth of it, we can define several constructors and use them in our definition of our objects. So let us do this. First, we will declare some variables for our class. The first will be final static integer, default year that equals to 2014. Next we have final string title, final integer release year, and integer copies sold. So when we want to define several constructors, we are using pretty simple construct, and that is we are writing the name of our class, that is books, parentheses, and here inside of parentheses we will now define the variables that should be specified when someone wants to create an object. For example, here we have now 3 variables that we would like to use when we are initializing object, and the first one is string t, integer r, and integer s. And we say that title will equal to t, release year equals to r, and copies sold are s. So what does it mean? It means that when person, let us open the book 01 and program 01. So previously we had this kind of definition for our class with our variables that were here. And when we wanted to to create a new object, then we were using the default constructor with empty parentheses, with empty brackets. Now, when we define, here's our code. When we define now this kind of constructor that takes 3 parameters, string, integer, and integer, now we would have to put here inside, in these brackets, these 3 parameters. The first one should be of type string, second one integer, and last one also integer. So this should be exactly these parameters here. And this will correspond the t that will be put by user when creating object will be automatically assigned to the variable title. R from here will be assigned to the variable release year, and S will be assigned to copies sold. We can define many more, actually more than one constructor. And let us have a look at this example when for example the user wants to define only title and release year, and copies sold will now have here default value. Copies sold will default to. So here if we would if we had put any value or initialized our copies sold, then this would be an default value. However, we did not put anything here. That's why this is default 0. So it will be default to 0. You see that in this first option we have to put 3 parameters inside. The second one we have to put 2 parameters inside, and we can also define, for example, the next option when we just put string t, and release year will be then automatically equal to our variable default year that we wrote here, that is 2014. So now let us see how can we use those constructors in a program. So we will have now books program with our main method. And now we will create several objects. So first we will declare them books, book 1, book 2, book 3, and book 4. So we'll have totally 4 objects. Let us first initialize our first book. Initialize object. So book 1 equals to new books. And this is now, previously we would put here just empty brackets, and that's all. However, now we will use one of those constructors. So let us use first one. So first case, we would need to write 3 parameters inside. First should be string, title, next release year, and next copy sold. So first should be string. Java is the name of our book 1. Then release year, let us say it's 2020. And copy sold 200. So now we instantiated our object using specified constructor, the constructor that we created in advance. And if we want to see what kind of values are now saved inside of those variables, we will use our system print line statements. So first title, and here we will since this variable here book 1, since this title variable is instance variable, we are accessing this variable with object name, and now putting title here. Let's use just print statement. So the next will be release year. And the last one, copies sold. And we are correcting here correspondingly. Copies sold. So now we are running this code. And we see title Java, release year 2020, copies sold 200. These are exactly the values that we used here when we instantiated our object using the constructor with 3 parameters. Now let us instantiate an object, book 2, that will use only 2 parameters. So our second constructor here. So we need to put here string, the title, and release year. And we are putting here the same Java and 2018. And we will use the same printing statements. We will just correct book 1 to book 2. And we want to print all those statements from the new line. That's why we're using our literal \n. not here, but here. Please pay attention to this literal when you are using it. You putting \n and then just before the word without separating it. Otherwise you will have some space. So you see here that the title was set to Java, the release year was set to 2018, and the copies sold is now 0, because this is now the default value that was taken from our instance variable. And the last one, we will use now the third option, when we just define here only string, only title, and the release year will be set to default year, and copies sold will be automatically 0, and we are correcting here everything to book3 and running the code. So you see, indeed, title is now Java, the same, release year is now 2014, that was taken as default year from here, this code, and copies sold are 0. What you have to remember is, in this way, now when you have defined several types of constructors, you are no longer allowed to use the default constructor. For example, if you would like to define the book3 as new books and putting nothing inside, this is not allowed anymore, because the constructor books is undefined. It means that if you would like to use this constructor, then you would need to define in the same way constructor with empty brackets, and then you could use it. You have seen here that when we were printing this code here, these constructors, there is some kind of redundancy inside, because we are typing several times title T, title T, title T, release year, release year, release year. So this can be avoided if you are using the keyword this. And this is how we can do this. So we will copy this books class, books2. I will close here, and books2 is open now here. So this is our constructors. These are our constructors, and what we want to do, we want to define only once our constructor and then further reuse this functionality. And this is possible with the keyword this. So in order to do this, you are deleting the statements inside of one constructor and putting here this, and inside we are putting the values. So first you have the constructor that describes the full parameters inside. So this is the maximum number of parameters are 3 in our case. So we have a constructor with all these 3 parameters. And now Java knows that this T is already defined, and this T is the same as here, and this equals to title, and this R is the same as here and equals to release year. And we are using the keyword this to tell that now we are taking the T that is here, that equals to the title, and the number that will be put will be assigned as here to the variable title. The same for R, release year, and the third one will be default 0. The same we can do with the last code, using this. And in this case, we had only one parameter that we wanted to define. So we will put here just this one parameter, and all other parameters, 3, are 0, set to 0. So this to 1. So this, what is done here, the constructor above is called. Call constructor above. And that's all that is important to know about constructors. So the next part, the last part of the methods is main. So actually we have already talked a lot about main. And for example, in our book 01 and book program 01. So what do you have to remember about main method is that the class should be separated from the main method, and you are the main method is usually used as the starting point of the execution of your program. So when you're running the program here, it starts with this main method. If your main method would be here in this book 01 class, and you would also have a lot of other methods, the very first method that would start the running of the whole code, it will be main method. The last part, just briefly, is about Java built-in classes. So there are a lot of built-in classes, and you see now some of them on your screen from the lecture slides. They provide you with very nice functionality. So for example, the one that I now have in my Eclipse shows you how to use the math class. The math class provides you with some methods, and these classes, they are already there in Java, and when you want to use them, you just put the name of the class and then the method that you want to use. So for example, if we want to use the maximum method, we are just putting here value 1 and value 2. Two variables, values, names of two variables. The same for minimum, and so on. So this class, they provide you very nice additional functionality. You don't have to define those methods by yourself. You can just use them. And I advise you to have a look on those methods. So let's say that this is part of your homework, to have a look on those methods and define what kind of functionality, what kind of methods from these classes can be useful for you and for writing your programs. So the very last part that I wanted to discuss with you, to show you, is about coding convention, and this is pretty important if you are going to share your code with someone else, since this improves the readability of the code, and it ensures that the person who will be reading your code will not lose time to get into it, and will can start with coding or can check it quickly. So we will have a look now on our existing class. This is class books2, and we have the very first variable that is here is final static variable. So there is, according to coding convention, there is some specific order to which your code should be written. So first, the very first, you have to put all your final class variables here. So final class variables. the first that we have here is final, static, integer, default, and so on. So first block will be devoted to those variables. The next block is for class variables, and here we would have some static some class variable, and of course the type, let us say integer. Here with number 2 class variables. The next are final instance variables, and here we have them. So these are all variables with final and without static keyword. And at the end there come all other variables that are instance variables. Instance variables. Then next, number 5, we have constructor method definitions. And here we have our constructor method definitions, 3 of them. Next, we put our instance methods, then class methods, and at the very end, if we do not outsource our main method to other program, to other class, then we put our main method at the very end of our class. So that's all. For homework, you have codes from the exercise that will be uploaded to Moodle. Have a look on the lectures whether you will find some slides with some unfamiliar code or the code that we didn't cover in our exercise. Please feel free to run this code. I prepared for you, as usually, some very nice quizzes and programming tasks. I hope that you enjoy them. And if you have any questions to quizzes or programming tasks, please post them to Moodle. Since I suppose that you, if you have some questions, then maybe you are not the only one. So maybe your question will help, and answer to this question will help anyone else, someone else. That's all for today. Thank you for your attention and see you next time. Bye.